What were the goods or resources that the Germans were eyeing first and foremost from these planets?
I mean, everything that you would need for empire building. Weaponry, materials like mineral ore, slaves, protection racket stuff. Basically everything you would want if you were trying to set up a civilization.
And they weren't fussy. I mean, they took anyone as slave as long as they were their inferior.
Or their superior. I mean, it's shocking how easy it is to enslave someone. Like it really is. There were species they have enslaved, to my knowledge still are enslaved, that were way ahead of them. But they were defenseless, so...
Wow. Yeah, actually, that's not dissimilar to what happened in the Mars Wars. But did you encounter some of these, like, really hard done by species and that hated humans?
Yeah, I did. There was these stick bug species that we enslaved. There were these, they look like short grays, but they're like cobalt blue. They're actually really pretty. And they're enslaved. There were giants that we had enslaved. A whole lot of aquatic species were enslaved. A ton of them.
That seems difficult to manage.
It is, but we did.
So what do you do with an aquatic slave race? How do you exploit them?
Well, they build our underwater cities and provide us with whatever resources we want. It's not always necessarily chattel slavery. Sometimes it's like, I'm trying to think of debt slavery or like blackmail slavery. So,
Right. And um how do they like punish if they go out of line? I mean, because we're terrestrial and then they're aquatic, you would think that they would have the upper hand.
they don't have the technology, is the thing. And if anyone stepped out of line, the usual response was to burn their villages and kill a decent chunk of them. Not so many, though, that they would stop.
So we're talking races that are spiritually inclined and don't have any means to defend themselves.
Yes, that's generally who we go after.
Damn. And do they ever successfully like break away? And do they ever just maybe even thrive under this system and find like hidden talents? I mean, I don't know. I'm just
Yeah, some of them do. It's been known to happen. Slave revolts do happen, and contrary to popular belief, they are sometimes successful. Not often, but sometimes.
Mhm.
And there are times where we'll find that they're actually really useful and actually really good for us, and so we'll try to improve our relations. So,
Yeah, not unlike the Draco with the Germans.
yeah.
And how many of these missions involved going back in time and trying to set up or secure a colony?
A lot. Um, Roughly 40%, if I had to put a number.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the rest were peace negotiations or trade deals or infiltrations, right? And
Yeah.
you also said that you weren't always in the field. You actually remote viewed a lot of the time. And how heavily did you rely on remote viewing?
Pretty heavily. That's how I did a lot of spying. I could also I would sometimes track fugitives using that. Uh,
And which one was more fun for you?
Definitely negotiating.
Hmm. But remote viewing, it's of a much higher caliber than it's on Earth there.
Yes.
And was it anything similar to the Orthodox protocol, or was it more freewheeling?
It was not like what the CIA requires or what's in the CIA handbook. That's completely unnecessary.
In what way?
I
You don't need to be double blind?
No, you don't. And in fact, it's better if you're not.
What about like, influencing your conscious mind to interfere?
That doesn't really happen very often. It's if you know what you're doing, then that's not an issue.
So we're being too rigid here.
Yeah, basically.
Well, what would you say is like a measure that would take it to the next level here?
You should tell people a little bit about what they're supposed to be seeing.
Without asking leading questions, just a general idea.
Yeah. And it is a good idea to have another person doing it along with them. Don't get me wrong, just to have like a backup to test for accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
But in my experience, that's more than enough. Because I also remote view on Earth. I have several friends who do, and like we remote view things together, and we'll see the same things, even without talking. But
Yeah, you're going about it well, I think, with the putting multiple minds on the same target. So, but you are also given like enhancements, so it's not quite comparable, right, to here.
no, it's not. You're correct. We were enhanced. Yeah.
And what were some of the things you were posing as? Because I think you often went on spy missions.
Smuggler. Sometimes I would pretend to be a spy, but for a different group of people than the people I was actually spying for.
Double agent.
Yeah. I would sometimes be like a mafia person.
Those are your favorite, right? When you were
Yeah.
cosplaying.
Yeah.
And you would live with these natives for months, sometimes at a time. And did they catch on to what you were doing, or were you usually effective?
Sometimes they caught on. There were times I was imprisoned a few times and had to be rescued, but usually I wasn't caught. Frequently, the Germans would actually erase my memories of what my actual mission was, and they would like manipulate circumstances so that I would get it done anyway.
What was one of these manipulations?
I remember this one time they wanted me to find out if someone was trading with ICC behind their back, this one species. And so they sent me in as someone who worked at the docks. And then they erased my memory of the fact that I didn't work at the docks, that I was actually spying for them. But they manipulated it. I still don't know exactly how they did it, but they manipulated it so that I did indeed catch this person trading secretly with the ICC.
So they implanted memories that were just slightly altered in their favor.
Yes.
Wow, it must be that they also using some sort of time travel device. I mean, something way above what we have, because those feel as real as the rest, I would guess.
Yeah.
And I understand that whenever you failed and you got caught or whatever, you would anti-telephone, you would dial back, you would go back to a set time and place before you failed to prevent the unwanted results. And how often did you have to do that?
Not often. Um, Sometimes, but not often.
And is it a portal that you have to go through when you're anti-telephoning, or what does
Yeah.
it look like?
Yes, it's a portal. They would usually set it up a few miles outside of whatever city I was in or something like that, and I would have an escape plan for if anything happened.
Escape plan. What did that entail?
A lot of times it would be like, because a lot of these species have like psychic cops, so like disguising yourself visually isn't going to be enough. So like I would have heavy psychic shielding if I got caught, and a disguise, and a route to the portal, usually.
And that's presumably why they did the implantation of memories too.
Yes.
And what about, did the portal have to stay open to like avoid any paradoxes? And does missing its window of being open because their portals they have to input a lot of power in them, and if they cease to be on, does that mean you would be stuck with two of you in the same time?
No, I mean, they would just. If anything went wrong, which it almost never did, because these portals, they were pretty low energy. They were just. At most, they were going back in time like a couple of months to a spot very close by, so that didn't take much power. But if anything went wrong, they would just anti-telephone to a different point, and it would be fine.
Oh, and you mentioned ICC earlier, and let's put this to rest. What were they actually referred to out there? Was it interplanetary corporate conglomerate or planetary corporations?
I believe interplanetary corporate conglomerate.
And did the Germans have a special name for them?
They did. I don't. It was something like Überschwein. It's something like that, but I think it was in like a different dialect. So it was not friendly. They did not get along, even though they sometimes worked together.
They pretty much hated each other's guts.
Yes, they did.
And still do.
They're like I think I can say this without getting a channel in trouble. They're like Israel and Saudi Arabia. They hate each other, but there are times where they're forced to work together because they're in close proximity.
Mm-hmm. That figures. Also, when you step into different time coordinates, does that automatically mean that your consciousness is split between the newly time traveled self and the one that had been in a slightly different time than you, that you're coexisting with?
No, it's all one body.
Well, what about, doesn't stepping in other time coordinates mean you can also meet yourself?
Well, yes, it does, but okay, how am I going to put this? You can meet yourself, but you're not going to. It's possible, but it's very unlikely because there are measures put in place that doesn't happen. There are checks and balances, is the best way to put it. They go to great lengths to make sure you won't. Okay, quantum echoes. It's very hard to change things. It's not impossible, but usually if something happens, it's going to happen no matter what. So even if you did meet your past self, that's unlikely to cause a paradox, because quantum echoing ensures 90% of the time-ish that stuff is going to happen the same no matter what.
And that's very interesting, but it still doesn't quite answer whether you are having to share consciousness because, you're governed by supposedly the same essence, the same spirit. And as long as there are two of you, even if they don't meet, then you're still concurrent, and there has to be, some sharing happening.
To a limited extent. Well, this also depends on if they're using you in your original body or if they send a clone in time. If they send a clone back in time, then there's basically no repercussions, because at that point it's a completely different person. But if it is the same body, then yes, you're sharing consciousness, but you're still not the same.
So it's seamless. I mean, you don't notice it necessarily. It's not like you're getting visions from the other one or something.
No, I mean, I do because I'm aware that I'm in these programs, but there are people, if they're not aware they're in these programs, then they're not going to know it.
Surely
Yeah.
there's a limit, I mean, to this, because to these discontinuitors, whatever, because the consciousness can only support so many of its like fractals, right? Being
Yeah,
around.
yeah, but I mean, it's a very high number. In the thousands, I believe.
For a normal human spirit?
That's actually one of the reasons why we're so useful. We have souls that are much more robust around that sort of thing than most other species.
Well, there's also this theory, circulating that we're just fractals of the really, evolved beings that have seeded us, like the Anunnaki and stuff, and we couldn't possibly contain their whole essence, so they just split themselves into hundreds, and we're those little fractals. Have you heard about that in space?
I've never heard that in space. I've heard that theory on Earth. To me, that sounds like horse shit, but I'm not gonna say if someone believes that, I'm not gonna say no to that either. If they believe that about themselves, I'm not gonna say no. But
We
I don't.
probably are fractals, but of higher beings. I mean, of really celestial, ninth dimensional or something that is not of the type that we collaborate with.
Yeah, pretty much. The one thing that I did hear in space that would lead me to maybe believe that is that the number of chakras you have, it corresponds to whatever density your soul or your higher self, whatever you want to call it, is supposed to be in. And humans have, what do we have? We have 7 chakras, I
7.
think. Yeah. So we're actually technically 7th dimensional beings, but
Oh, really? Wow.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's interesting. So you
yeah,
have it on good authority.
yeah. This was what?
Accepted science.
Yes, this was told to me by a Draco prince. So he was like, "You people, if you were aware, you could be so much, you could be above us even, but you're all a bunch of idiot children." I don't remember the exact words. Of course, this was all telepathic, but like, yeah.
And
And
that was apropos of nothing.
it wasn't apropos of nothing. It was like the details around how this conversation came up are murky to me right now. But like, we were arguing about our one of us had fucked up the other one's relations with somebody, and we were in a row about it.
Mhm. Did they mention, I mean, did he mention how many chakras they have?
5, I believe.
So they're fifth density. Interesting. And what's the highest number you've heard of some beings?
11, I think. I've seen one being that was kind of an aquatic humanoid thing, a fish person, I guess, who had 11.
And
That's
what set him apart?
her. She was a queen of her people, and she was supposedly one of the most enlightened beings around, like in this universe.
And did you get to talk to her as part of these Nacht Waffen missions?
Yeah, I did.
Because I'm assuming that the Germans are considered like scummy and lowly compared to such elevated beings. So how did they come into contact there?
We wanted a colony on the planet she ruled, so we had to go through the authority. If she's hearing this, I'm sorry. We did actually pull the wool over her eyes somehow. I'm still not sure how we managed to do it, but like, we made ourselves, I think we disguised ourselves as refugees,
Wow.
and so yeah.
And did it involve anti-telephoning?
Yes, there was anti-telephoning. I think we went for this mission in like Earth years. I think it was like the late 1700s.
What was the highest count of anti-telephoning for a single mission? And is there like a limit wherein it becomes the timeline or whatever too fixed, too unmalleable?
Yeah, there is a point where that happens. First of all. Second of all, the highest number that I can remember is around, I think we went back like around 15 times to this planet. because there was this species. It was a highly desirable, lush garden planet, like super Earth. It was what NASA would call super habitable. Like it was a paradise planet, and we really wanted it. But we could not figure out how to communicate with the species there. And so we kept having to go back further in time, trying to communicate with them, failing, and then getting kicked off of this planet. We eventually did figure it out, though.
So if you succeeded with such a tricky, I mean, such a coveted and convenient planet, then is there anything that they didn't succeed in?
Oh yeah, all the time.
So they did have to just yield and just move on a lot of time.
Oh yeah. They're like any government. For every major win, there are 5 less major losses, you know?
So that planet, that was like the most optimum you've seen up to now, like in terms of habitability, and what made it so like nice?
It wasn't the best, but it was very up there. But it orbited an orange K-type star, which is actually our favorite. It had good gravity. It was lush, very, very fertile land for farming, and it was a paradise. Like, it was just absolutely breathtaking to look at.
And natural, I guess, not tempered with like here, right?
No, it was not tampered with hardly at all. This species was like, I would compare them to like the beings from Avatar in their spirituality. They didn't look anything like them, but in their spirituality, that's what I would compare them to. They were very psychic, very in touch with nature, very peaceful, you know.
And was it all green, or was there large swaths of steppe, or were there deserts and were there oceans?
There were oceans. I didn't see deserts. It was it wasn't quite tropical. I would say it was like Mediterranean. Most of this planet was in its climate. So it was warm, but not too warm. Um, Not too wet, but wet enough to grow just about anything. And I said there were oceans, lakes. There was like karst mountains,
But
karst. I
still
think
all things that are recognizable from Earth.
yes.
No real like standout anomalies in that sense.
The wildlife was very different, but like not so different that it had like giant bugs and it did have these like jellyfish that were actually airborne creatures.
Wow,
Yeah.
that was sentient.
No, they weren't sentient. They were like butterflies to that planet.
Yeah, there were. What's the word when they glow? Yeah,
Bioluminescent.
actually.
Yeah, they did glow. Most of them were bright blue, some of them were bright red, some of them were pink.
So that was just another assignment for you, just a few weeks or something.
Yeah.
And were you also sent in interiors of planets? I mean, hollows.
Yeah, I was. Where a big chunk, I'm not going to say a majority, but a big chunk of Germans will colonize for protection purposes. That's very common.
Cool. And so maybe give us one example of a mission that was way too ambitious and just failed outright.
There was one time we were trying to stop these 2 species from fighting. One was a feline race, not the Lyrans. These were a different feline race. They looked like Siamese cats, not lions. And they were actually nasty as hell. They were very pretty to look at, but they were awful. And they were fighting these dinosaur beings who were also pretty awful. And I'm not sure how or why we got involved in this in the first place, but those species have been battling for millions of years. And we thought we could fix it, and we just could not. We got stabbed in the back at every turn, and eventually we had to just give up and move on to another star system.
Wow. And did you have a fixed protocol for going into the past that you couldn't, mess with this or that? What was something that was prohibited?
You could not mess with bloodlines of people important to the timeline, unless that was the specific goal, was to kill someone or whatever, so that you would change the timeline. But unless you were ordered to, you couldn't.
So was that it, or was there something else?
That was the big one. Essentially, you just had to avoid. You were supposed to change as little as possible that was irrelevant. Whatever was relevant that you were trying to change, you were supposed to do whatever was in your power, but you were supposed to avoid changing anything else.
And did you always abide by that, or did you like to sneak in some cheeky actions?
I probably have a few children who weren't there in the original timeline.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
I think I do. But what about like when we hear about some accounts of time travelers, they're told not to even address anything. So was it strict like that? I mean, don't even give any hint that you are a time traveler. Was there like, did you always dress by the certain code and stuff like that? I mean, or is that just particular to primitive civilizations like ours?
Was more like that, more with primitives.
Right. Okay. And who dictates these instructions for the missions? Is it the German High Command?
Yes, them, High Command, and the Galactic Authority.
Oh, really?
Also. Mhm.
And was this always the case, or was it only after they had those run-ins with the Galactic Authority after committing those crimes and, having to be answerable?
We always kind of follow their laws. We always did. Um, we've been having to more recently because of run-ins, like you mentioned.
Right. But isn't there like a huge rivalry between the Galactic Authority and the Draco Empire?
No.
No, there isn't.
No.
So the Galactic Authority is separate from the arch enemies of the Draco, which are maybe that collective of humanoids that we discussed.
Correct.
And do you have a name for that collective? The Ashtar, maybe?
I don't have a name. I've never heard of Ashtar in space myself. Not saying he doesn't exist, but
Yeah, there's one that is, legit and one that is posing as them. You cut out.
I'm not sure this other group has much of a name, really.
Okay.
At least not in English or German, for that matter.
Right.
They might be what we would call the Federation, possibly. But there's a lot of little groups out there, you know.
Yeah, I think it is the Federation, now that you mention it. Okay, so how many Dark Fleet-like branches have you noticed?
Counting.
Sure.
Finnish, German, American, Japanese, Vietnamese, Chinese, Spanish, Russian, British.
French?
Yeah, there's a French one, Homme de la Nuit, Men of the Night in English.
And they all answer to the High Command as well?
Yes.
And they all wear the insignia, or do they have new ones?
No, they don't all wear the insignia. They have their own insignia, most of them, individually. The French one is a fleur-de-lis. The Chinese one is like a dragon eating its tail wrapped around the galaxy. Can't remember. Oh, the British one is a lion set against with like stars around it.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
And they sometimes settle the colonies just in that one nationality, and then they speak that language, or is it always multinational?
It's usually at least a little multinational, but sometimes it's not. Some of them, there's an Indian group. Not many people have mentioned them, but they're extremely insular. Extremely so.
Interesting. So you dropped this in one of your interviews that I'm not sure if it's one of the missions with Nacht Waffen with Heinrich, but you recall a situation where Earth got invaded by Mantids and that you somehow managed to eventually strike a peace deal with.
Yeah, I did. That was Heinrich. That was actually just this past summer that this happened. And there's two other people who were with me who also remember this, by the way. Joseph is one of them. The other one is no longer public, so I'm not going to say who it is. But there were negotiations on the moon with the Mantid Empire in their little enclave.
The Imperial Mantids?
Yes. The ones who look like a praying mantis.
And who gave the Germans the Black Goo regen tanks?
Yes. They've wanted Earth for quite a while. So in May of 2022, when everyone was distracted and whatnot, they did invade. And for people wondering why no one noticed, we did go back in time and stop them before it happened. So this is an averted timeline, essentially. And
so essentially we did live it, and it's somewhere in our consciousness lived it, but we don't have recall of it.
yeah, it's like a Mandela effect, but in reverse, kind of, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. And what was their means of infiltration or invasion?
Well, they started with taking out satellites remotely. They had some of their psionic assets blow them up remotely. And then they opened portals to within Earth's atmosphere, directly above major cities, and they would swarm in and just destroy everything in sight.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And how is it that, these beings that mantids are said to be the most ancient around, how could we actually, avert it and just outsmart them? How did we get extra help?
I believe that's part of it, and also we went back in time and we started the negotiations before they invaded.
Well, yeah, but they would have still continued, even in that anti-telephoning timeline, to have that intent. And how did you actually, thwart their intents?
This is hard to answer, but I'll do my best. Everyone has their price, basically. We agreed we would begin paying them a higher tribute than we already do. I believe we actually gave them a bit more space on Earth and stuff like that. I wasn't read into everything, keep in mind also.
Of course.
Yeah.
What was their upshot with this? Were they gonna just, like Simon Park's account, hybridize with us and then continue to, enjoy the spoils of Earth, like feeding off the soul and stuff like that of Gaia?
Pretty much, yeah. Although I don't think they were really going to hybridize us. I think we were going to probably go extinct.
Oh, okay.
Or all be shipped off as slaves.
Damn.
Uh,
So do we like owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Germans for this?
yes, but I mean, this kind of thing is not exactly super uncommon in the galaxy, so yeah, we owe them a debt to an extent, but on the other hand, they owe us one. So,
And did they manage to appease them, or is there a threat of them, relapsing? I mean, and are there other possible invasion scenarios looming over us?
everyone wants a piece of this pie. Everyone. Every military power within this galaxy and some not in this galaxy want a piece of it. So, I
It
mean,
goes back to the DNA being so flexible, right?
that and also our location.
Oh yeah, that too. Yes.
Look up, to anyone watching this, look up Sol or the sun on a map of the galaxy. If you control this solar system, you can control the entire Sagittarius arm and Orion spur of this galaxy.
It's in a hot spot, right? And also it's in a place that is not very turbulent in terms of celestial activities that would reset like other planets are exposed to.
Yeah.
So, okay, what do you make of the memories where you saw Angelina Jolie as a governor of one of these planets as part of your missions?
That, well, first of all, I'm not the only person who's seen her in the programs, but
In the same
also,
capacity?
no, not in the same capacity, but just out there.
So there are many clones of her, or what?
I think so. Our elite are the same as their elite. So, I mean, it's not surprising you would see a lot of the same people in positions of power or celebrity out there as you would here.
Yeah, but all she did was just film a few movies and, be born into the industry because of her father. So is that the reason why she is cloned and then set in space and then just still maintains her fame or stardom there? Or how did you make it to governor?
That I don't know. She didn't tell me her life story.
But you're sure it was her and looked and sounded like her.
Yeah, it did. She. This is a thing that they do with actors and people like that. Is sometimes they'll trade fame here for like an actual position of power out there, or vice versa.
But the fame here precedes that.
Not necessarily. There are also people here who started off famous in the Breakaway and were spliced into life here. I mean, it goes both ways.
But in this case, you
There's
would say the fame here preceded it.
Yes, I believe so.
So just the fact that she was probably the most recognizable face on Earth made her a really hot commodity out there.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Did you actually interact with her?
Yeah, I did. Um, she wasn't nice. She was on black goo at the time. I mean, maybe she still is. I don't know. But
But once you're on it, aren't you pretty much on life?
well, yeah. But I mean, this could have been a clone of hers that I saw. So I mean, gosh. So she wasn't very nice to me, but I didn't know who she was because, of course, I didn't have much exposure to Earth media.
Oh yeah, because Heinrich left Earth at 6.
And he thought literally until this last summer when the thing with the Mantids happened, he thought it was destroyed. So,
Whoa.
yeah.
What was your emotional reaction to that?
Shock and rage at having been lied to, which led into the whole thing with the Centurion archives and all that.
So, moving on to the maybe disputed German homeworld, which is Centurion, located in the Alpha Centauri star system, which is like a triple star system or something. What can you tell us about it, which was also part of your one of your major missions there. I believe you said that it's artificial and that it's even bigger than Vega.
Yeah, it's around the size of Saturn. It's a Dyson sphere that they terraformed the outer layer, or the outside of it. So it does have like mountains and oceans and greenery and all that. So for all intents and purposes, it is a planet, but it's artificial.
And so it's made of like material that you would maybe find on ships or something inside.
Probably. I never got to go that far down inside to see what it was
But
actually.
you would assume that it's hollow.
Yes.
But the thing is, when you Google Dyson sphere, it says that it's a construct that encircles, that encompasses the sun. But this acted as a planet; it had its orbit around the sun.
No, this was built. The planet was built with a star inside of it.
Really?
Yeah. So it's if you were to go down deep enough into it, you would see there is like a captured white dwarf down in there.
But so a sun that was smaller than Saturn.
Yes, it was about the size of Earth. I mean, that's about the size a white dwarf is.
Okay. But you said that it was like a planet, but then does that mean that it had multiple suns, that star system? You have to have the sun, right?
Yeah, it had a sun. It did orbit another star. I think it had once been a binary system where there was like a small star orbiting a bigger one, but then they built this planet around the smaller ones.
Was it like a rarity, or have you been on other Dyson spheres?
It's a rarity. I mean, I have been to a couple, but they're not common.
Was the other pretty much alike, or was it different?
The other one was a Mantid one, and it was essentially one gargantuan factory. I
Of
guess
what?
everything that their empire needs.
Oh,
And that,
wow.
yeah, I think the population of that one, the Mantid one, was probably in the trillions. But yeah,
What about the native inhabitants there? I think you said there were greys.
they were almost grays, but not quite. They had skin like ours, and they were around 7 feet tall. So they basically looked like bald, naked people with like solid black eyes and no external genitalia. They were actually really creepy to look at.
And they were the most populous there, I guess?
Pretty much, yeah. Although I actually think that we've surpassed them by now.
Wow. Um, yeah, because they have no genitalia, right? But
They
so,
reproduce somehow, but yeah.
yeah, cloning, I guess. But you said it was a jungle. Does that mean it looked green from afar?
Yeah, it did. The poles were colder, and it did snow there some, but it was still a jungle.
It snowed and it was a jungle,
Yeah,
like in
yeah.
Crisis.
I haven't played that game.
What was the temperature actually generally? Was it just the mild 70, like ideal for humans?
No, it was hotter, usually, at least in the areas we settled. It was colder towards the poles. It wasn't excessive. It hovered in between the 70s and the 90s.
Did it have strong weather?
It had some really fierce thunderstorms. Water spouts were a common issue in the coastal areas because it did have some ocean. Not a lot, but some.
They would have had to import that water because it was a sun before.
Yeah, they did somehow. This was all built like billions of years ago. I mean,
And yet now humans are the main owners of it.
yeah, it was abandoned for quite a while, or mostly abandoned. I think like it got evacuated during the Orion Wars, and people didn't come back for quite a while.
Yeah, they must have been stoked to find it.
Yeah, we were.
And I guess in terms of imagery, the best depiction of it in pop culture is like Avatar.
Similar, yeah. It didn't have bioluminescent plants that I saw, but
But it had trees that went up thousands of feet.
oh yeah.
And did we also go there and deforest it, or did we play nice?
We did deforest some of it, yeah, to build.
But it's the size of Saturn, so whatever, right?
Yeah,
And you actually went there before with another altar, right, in 1915, or was it the same?
that was Heinrich also. And he negotiated for us to set up the first colony that we had there.
Just himself? Was he like the key player?
No, there were others. We were negotiating with Draco because they own Centurion.
They're in the Draco Empire.
Yeah. So we were negotiating with them to get this abandoned city that had been built by the Arcturians.
But they're allegedly ninth dimensional, so did you feel imprints of their advanced architecture on your being?
Not really, although it was incredibly high tech, and there was some level of consciousness technology at play.
I would think.
Yeah, like doors would open up for you. Sometimes like rooms would move if you would just think like, I wish I'd arranged the furniture this way instead of this way, it would shift. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was stuff like that happened.
And so you eventually secured it in 1915, and that was the last you saw it until again in the 70s.
Yes, I saw it in the 70s. Oh, I'm not sure actually when I was there as part of the Montauk project. That's a whole other story, but I saw it again in the 70s. This was actually more of an intelligence thing where I was picking up something from someone in a hotel, and the security was insane. Like, I had to be escorted at all times by a super soldier. I had to. Oh, I had to have a chip put in my head that if I thought anything, I don't know, insurrectionary or whatever, that my head would explode on sight.
So
Like,
it was hooked to an AI system, like a
yeah,
supercomputer.
yes, there's a supercomputer underneath the city that's scanning everyone all the time.
But it was particular to that place, so only there did you get this harsh treatment.
Yeah, because this was a very elite place where, like, the uber wealthy of the Breakaway, like, the elite of the elite live.
So I suppose that's how come black goo is so prevalent there.
Yes.
Did you ever get offered it?
No. I mean, with my job, I'm forbidden from ingesting it. Your average colonist doesn't even know black goo exists.
Right.
Okay.
This prevalence of elites also, is this what led to the slavery being practiced so openly?
Yes.
And was it a case of like humiliation, or they still have a modicum of dignity?
They still had some dignity, except for like sex slaves, but that's a whole other thing. But the slaves who were out cleaning or who were like running errands for their owners, I guess you would say, they had some dignity. They had no rights whatsoever under the law, but they weren't in squalor because I mean
Right.
this colony was spotless in every way.
It also almost seems like they didn't even deserve it. I mean, they were really spoiled by the a crystalline city. I mean, considering their lack of ethics.
I would agree with that.
And you also visit other abandoned crystalline cities and maybe ancient sites.
Yeah, I did. The Crystalline City is where some of the ICC families live. The Krugers, the Marshalls, the Connors, the Serenes, the Arasakas, etc.
Wow.
Yeah,
Like
and
they have huge estates there, and
yeah, they do.
um, they have portals that lead them to other planets.
Hmm. They do. And when I was at the ancient sites, this is, I mean, we're going to do a Montauk show someday, hopefully soon, but
Sure.
I can just tell this story quickly. And there's a lot of backstory. If people want to know more about this, they can message me. But I was personally picked out of a lineup by Paul Serene to participate in a dig on Centurion while I was at Montauk, or
And you were an archaeologist.
yeah, although I was 9. I was literally 9 years old. But
Was it remote viewing based?
no, I was there, and I was using my abilities at these sites to find caches of technology. If I did find something, then I got a steak dinner and a warm, cozy bed. If I didn't, then I got electrocuted, regenerated, and I slept in the mud.
But still on Centurion.
Yes.
So you had Montauk projects that just happened on other planets.
Yeah, well, I mean, Montauk, we did go to other planets. And Montauk, the base was also used as kind of a source for assets by a lot of other factions, if you know what I mean. Like, a lot of times, if a faction is looking for someone with a specific gift, they'll go to Montauk and be given a list of kids by those directors, and then they'll buy an altar of that kid. So, yeah.
That planet sounds like a treasure hunter's dream, right?
Oh, it was.
At the same time, it can't have been very deep because it's just the first layer is terraformed. But it went a few hundreds of kilometers, I guess.
Yeah, I believe so.
And even the moons were settled, and there were, in general, a lot of species on the planet, right?
Yes, to both things. It had 3 moons, I believe, and they had stuff on them. People, I should say. They had people on them. And these moons, I believe, were also artificial, by the way. But,
And in addition to the number of elite families living there, you also had a lot of different factions that demo their really cutting edge technologies, like some sort of defense systems. Could you go into that?
it was the first planet that had the Raytheon planetary defense grid, which is essentially satellites that have missiles that travel at almost the speed of light that can blast just about anything out of the sky, and they can also stop orbital bombardment.
Were you part of any of these showcases?
No, I just knew about them.
Hmm.
And there were also other tech expos, I guess, like military expos of like new weapons, things like that.
So let's pick up another loose thread, which is you snuck in the fact that you visited Valhalla space station. And what was the job that led you there?
Negotiations. I go there all the time for negotiations. Valhalla is kind of like the Geneva of space, if that makes sense. It's a neutral ground where meetings of all types will happen. Um,
And how, size-wise, give us like an estimate.
well, they used basement universe technology, which is essentially a thing bigger on the inside than on the outside.
Good God.
Yeah. So,
How can that be? I mean, what's behind that?
well, like I said, I don't know exactly how the physics works, but it's a thing called basement universe technology. You can look it up. It's a known theoretical thing. So, the
And
Valhalla,
how many times bigger on the inside than the outside? I mean, yeah.
about 5 in the case of the Valhalla. It was around 40 miles across on the outside. On the inside, it was around 200 miles across. So,
So it's has its own like ecosystem and stuff.
oh yeah, yeah. It's its own small country, essentially.
But it's all peopled throughout.
Yes.
So, yeah, and you said that it got moved from Orion to the Pleiades.
Yes, it did. I'm not sure why.
So it's capable of propelling itself.
Yes. Oh yeah, quite easily. It's a pretty cool place. It's one of the few places I actually enjoy going to. Because, like, basically when you're on a giant ring floating in space, there's not really anywhere to go or anywhere to run off to that no one can find you in, and there's not really any way to get away with a crime. So that's one of the places where my handlers will actually let me go off and do fun shit that I want to do. So, yeah.
Wasn't this feeling of safety also a feature on the insides of planets?
No,
Why not?
because it's so much bigger, and because there are places to go, and because, like, not everyone can be monitored all the time there.
So you like this kind of artificial habitat? You think it's like a sweet spot? Or is it just that Heinrich liked it?
I liked it too. I mean, I like it too, but Heinrich likes it because there's a modicum of freedom, which people think that I have the coolest job ever being a diplomat, but, like, these people don't know much about diplomats if they think that, because they're high-level assassination targets.
Wow.
So, like, I mean, usually all I ever got to see was the hotel and the German embassy on whatever planet.
And who assassinated you? Various assassins, ETs, right?
Yeah, ETs, like rebel groups, anti-German groups. Just
Were there many methods of, like, was it from afar, like snipers, or was it like daggers, or
I don't think anyone was ever able to get close enough to stab me. I remember being sniped a few times.
so you have the recall of dying, I mean,
Yeah.
of the events leading up to your death, and then just waking up from anti-telephoning back.
Hmm. Yeah.
But you never lost your life permanently. They always recovered you.
Yeah.
Nice. But at the same time, you said that Heinrich was even more unstable than Adam, who was quite, on the edge himself. And could you briefly go over why that was, given that you also said that that by and large Germans treat their assets a little better than Americans?
Yes, they do. Heinrich has lost everything multiple times. And right now he's especially upset because he rehomed for a few days to me, and then he was ripped back out a few days later and reactivated. I've calmed him down somewhat because that did make a psychic connection between me and him, so we are communicating now. There's some of this that's not just about me that I can't talk about, but he's had several very good friends who he's lost for no known reason. They just were not there one day.
In the Breakaway,
Yes.
related to you.
Not related to me necessarily, no. These were just other people in the Breakaway who he was friends with.
But you said that he forcibly deintegrated himself, right? And
No,
then,
he was forcibly deintegrated by someone. By the Germans. He was ripped back out of my body.
but to begin with, he integrated himself forcibly, like Adam.
Yes. But unlike Adam, like, I welcomed him because I knew what I was doing, and he did tell me he was going to do it first. So,
But you managed to reunite even after the integration.
yes, that
How's that?
telepathically.
Right.
We're in communication now. He did surface for a while earlier in this interview, actually. And, like, just on a personal note, thank you for doing this, because, like, he's been feeling very silenced lately.
Anytime.
Yeah.
It's the first time I heard of an alter being forcibly deintegrated. I mean, I had no idea how deep this well went. I mean, just when you thought you had like a grip on it. Have you had it before, or was it a first?
I believe this was the first time that I was aware of it, at least.
But it's isn't it like I don't know, underhanded by them? I mean,
Very.
yeah.
Very. And it was, they weren't nice about it. They had to torture me to bring him back up. So
They
yeah,
torture you here?
yes. Well, I mean, they abducted me and then sent
Memory
me
wiped
back.
you?
Yeah, but like I remembered it the next morning when I woke up immediately. Like, and
Parts of it.
yeah, parts of it. There were several other assets present who were also having programming done, but we were taken by TR3B to a facility in Egypt underneath the pyramids, which is a very ancient facility that has been revitalized, let's say, by, I'm not sure entirely if it's naval intelligence or the CIA. There's this facility down there that this was done to a number of us in. Um,
It's their response to the increase in disclosure or
yeah,
something, right? They're taking extreme measures.
yeah, they are.
That's pretty much all I had in mind for today. We're bound to pick it up with Joseph. So yeah, just really well done on describing these, and hopefully catch you soon.
Thank you.